All right. So I would like us to welcome Gideon Otashu to today's webinar, and he would be our resource person talking about cloud, DevOps, and everything in between. So, Gideon, over to you.
Well, hello, Esther. Um, Hello, everyone.
Hi,
I
hi.
was just rushing here, see the amount of claps and love reactions. So, I appreciate your. Um, my name is Gideon Otashu. I am cloud DevOps engineer. Currently work for Wema Bank PLC. I I am an enterprise infrastructure officer here at Wema Bank PLC. I also do data architecture for the bank, um, and I also fill in some DevOps roles also. Basically, I manage the bank's cloud infrastructure and also their on-prem infrastructure. I um, have experience in other fields. Before I became a cloud DevOps engineer, I was a telecommunication, or I am still a telecommunication engineer because I still have my current certification and everything. My last project was the Lagos Ibadan Railway project, which spans all the way from Lagos to Ibadan. And I was at some point acting HOD for GSMR and railway signaling for the entire project. I I've also worked as a data scientist and also a data analyst in the past. So I've had tech and engineering backgrounds. I would say my LinkedIn profile is quite confusing because you're like this guy choose something, choose a hustle. It's as if I'm everywhere. But that's a brief introduction of myself and my expertise. So I think I'll hand over back to Esther.
Okay, yeah, good to have you, Gideon, and thank you for the plenty English. Even though if some of us don't understand some of those things, yeah. But today we want to talk about getting into DevOps. So, I'd like you to share with us your story. How did you get into DevOps? What is DevOps? What would be your counsel for someone trying to get into DevOps? So it's like 32 questions in one, but basically just centered on what DevOps engineering is all about and how a newbie or someone thinking about it can get into it and transition or become an expert in it.
Um, so basically, I had two questions. I maybe if I talk about one, you remind me so I can talk about the other one because I think I might forget. So I would start by what DevOps is, and I'll try to make it as easy as possible so that people who are not technical will understand what I'm saying. Um, so the role was born out of system operations, whereby um, you manage on-prem structure, on-prem data centers. So basically, you have your on-prem servers, which is basically example your computer, and then you have a hyper-V on your computer where you can. When I mean a hyper-V, I mean like a virtual environment where you can have maybe one or two or three VMs on each running different things. So in the corporate setting, you have like a file server on one VM, you have your mail server on another VM. Maybe you have another VM for your application, you have another VM for your database. So, and then you manage all these things, interconnect them um, via networking and make sure everything is running fine. So over time, AWS discovered that there are some inefficiencies, especially when you are scaling to a very large scale. You are, making applications like servicing millions upon millions of users. So they decided to build. a platform where uh, they can easily scale up and scale down based on traffic to the Amazon website. And they created the platform AWS, and they discovered that it's something that they can scale much larger to a much larger form factor so that they can make money from it. And that's how cloud DevOps was born. So it's basically you just doing the same thing in another server halfway across the world, or maybe even in the country that you are in. If you're not in Nigeria, I think the only data center that you can say is cloud is Huawei. I think they're building in Lagos. And the closest in Africa, we have one in South Africa for AWS and Azure also. And I think Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. But then most times we use not Northern Europe because it's closest to Africa to reduce latency. So the role cloud DevOps began to evolve over time. And, you know, these days it's more about, if you hear the role cloud DevOps, you hear things like CI/CD, which is just short for continuous integration and continuous deployment. And what does that mean? DevOps is a role that integrates closely with the dev team. When I say the dev team, I'm talking about the software engineering team. So if you're a software engineer on this call, or you are aspiring to be a software engineer, once you build your application, you have to host it somewhere. The hosting part is usually the DevOps part. But over time, before you just host it on GoDaddy, just panel login. But then there are certain bottlenecks to, those kind of simple deployments like scalability and site reliability. So big people began to get beefier computers that can, handle more workload. So continuous integration, continuous deployment is a kind of synergy between you, the operations team that makes the website available, and the dev team that creates code or creates updates for the website. So there is a circle, which is the continuous integration circle, and then the continuous deployment, which is the DevOps team, or you, the DevOps engineer, taking this code that has been developed by the software engineers that has gone through unit testing, the software testers or application testers have tested and it's fine, and then deploying it on the internet or on your hosting service. Now it goes deeper than that, but that's just the surface definition. Um, that's just the surface definition. And there are different tools that enables you to do this, which I think I might touch about, I will touch later, but let me answer the second question that I can remember first. How did I get into DevOps? So after my NYC, I was working as a Python instructor in Jos Plateau State, in a foundation called NHub Foundation, and I met really brilliant individuals there. Emmanuel, Tochi, are really brilliant people. And Emmanuel at that time was a ML engineer at Carbon, which was pay later. And that's how I got interested in data science, and I began to study data science. I got my data science certification from IDAF, and it's the name of the cohort or the fellowship was I Aspire Fellowship here in VI Lagos. And once I was certified, I think the certification period was about close to 2 years. So just before COVID, close to 2 years, we were taught data science, data analysis, data science, machine learning, data engineering. We were taught neural nets, deep learning also, computer vision and the rest. So after the certification period, we graduated and we were absorbed into the parent company, which is IDAF. And we became data scientists and we began to work on real life projects. So and it's my team. We're working on a certain project. We're supposed to create a machine learning model for an American company, life insurance company. And after we created the model, we're in talks with the team in the US, and we didn't know where we had created it, and it was doing wonderfully. When you put it through, when you put your model through the tests that it's required, the area under the curve, variable the curve, the truth table, and all those, the accuracy scores and everything. And we're like, okay, that's fantastic. Now we need to deploy it. Huh? I was like, we're the ones that are going to deploy this model. And that's when my colleague and I began to do some research, and we discovered AWS. We also discovered, first of all, we discovered AWS, and then we discovered Heroku. And that's how we were introduced into the world of deployments. So back then, we didn't know what we were doing was called MLOps. Do we have cloud DevOps, there's MLOps, which is continuous integration develop and continuous development of machine learning models. And with time, we're able to deploy the model and build um, a like an API for it to integrate with the parent website. And it was quite a challenge from the beginning. And if there's something I don't do is back down from challenges. So as a result, I was like, okay, I need to know what is this and how to get better at this. And that's where my deep dive into AWS began. So first, I got an AWS certification in machine learning, and then I began to tinker with cloud formation, elastic beans, and all those AWS services that have to do with deployments, and then eventually CI/CD. And then I also, to bolster my learning curve, I took a course with ALX. I think it was ALXT at that time, a DevOps course. And when we started, it was nice. It was just going well. When we reached the middle, people started dropping out. People started crying. They had to bring psychologists to talk to us, because a lot of people were dropped out. They can't take it anymore. It was tough. It was pretty tough. I felt sick, very sick. But I was able to graduate, and that was it for me. That's AWS course. They say, I used to always tell my friends that if I'm interviewing anybody for a certain role and the person tells me they have finished any ALX courses, I'll just give them the role automatically, because of how difficult ALX can get. So that really built me up. But after that course, I got a job as a telecommunication engineer, which I began to practice. And eventually, when the project was up, and the next project was after the Lagos Ibadan Railway project, the next project was Kaduna Kanu Railway project and Kanu Maradi Railway project. And I was like, nah, I've lived in my life. Let me try somewhere else in Nigeria. So I was like, okay, I have this skill. Let me start applying to places I know I can apply the skill to. And I began to apply, and as I landed at Wema Bank, and interviewed with the bank, and finally got a job at the bank. And I also do side gigs for some microfinance banks, some development banks in Nigeria that are trying to migrate their workloads to the cloud, and also um, manage the availability of their resources on the cloud too. So I feel like if I'm missing one more question, that's why I don't know, Esther.
Okay, that's quite a story actually. And thank you for your bias with ALX.
I just think it's a great place to learn. If you are not willing to learn, then maybe you should just hold on. Alex is quite tough.
All right. So if you were to advise somebody that's thinking of going into DevOps, what would it be?
Okay, so a lot of people tend to divert into DevOps because they are trying to avoid the coding side of tech. Instead of becoming like a front-end engineer, back-end or a software engineer, you're like, this let's go there, let's go. But as soon as um they discover that there is a certain kind of code. First of all, um yeah, Python is there, for scripting and automating one or two tasks. But apart from Python, there is YAML, which is like core language. Most people don't take it as a language, it's a scripting language. So people don't rate scripting language as programming languages. And they say it's easy. So everybody, okay, okay, fine, no problem. But if you are going to become a DevOps engineer, I would say, first of all, you have to understand software development. Not necessarily becoming a software engineer, but understand the process of software development. One of the key fundamentals of DevOps engineering is these days is agile, and the different frameworks, because teams are built using agile frameworks or agile itself. So that's how workflows have been are usually handled within development teams, whether it's software development or it's cloud DevOps. So when you start, it may seem easy, but eventually it becomes a daunting task. I think there is no easy meal in tech, I would say, because regardless of the path you follow, you can say, oh, you want to become a data analyst and you're just dealing with Excel or perhaps Power BI. But then when you become a data analyst and you discover that you want to really grow in data analysis, then you start learning Python and you start learning how to handle frameworks or libraries like Pandas, Matplotlib, or even dabble into scikit-learn self, like machine learning. So at first, it may look easy, and I would say that is the best part where you should understand the hoops, the terminologies, the tools that you are working with, and the tools that you could potentially work with, because there are different kind of tools that you use for different functionalities in DevOps. There are tools that are built around CI/CD, like Azure DevOps, like Circle CI. Um, they are built around that framework, and you know, understanding those frameworks, even when you build applications, you have to know your uptime, you have to understand your peak periods, you have to build dashboards using like Grafana, you know, or some other monitoring tool throughout your process. Well, if you want to get started with DevOps, one of the things you must understand is Bash. You must understand Bash because Bash is very important. Most of the deployments that are done within the DevOps ecosystems are not done using Windows PCs, or most servers are Linux based. Though if you are working in some organizations, most that sometimes, like, let me use my organization for instance. Here at Wemo Bank, um, if you are handling on-prem solutions, most of them are Windows based. For those who work in banks and have been around software development teams or testing teams or DevOps teams in the Nigerian banking system, you understand that most of the servers are Windows based servers. A handful are Linux servers. But if you really want to optimize your workflow, if you want to automate deployments, you have to use tools like Docker, Kubernetes, and these tools are Linux-based tools. So you have to have a very strong understanding of, Bash scripting languages, and there are different flavors. I think for MacBook they use Z shell, and there's fish, and well, that's just by the way. So basically, first understand Bash. I think it's an interesting. When I was much more younger, learning Bash, I felt like a supercomputer because, like a superhuman, because when you're watching those Hollywood movies where the hackers are just hitting, and then you see all those numbers on the black screen and those lines, and then you're hitting controls on Bash and you're seeing the same thing, you'll be like, hell yeah, I've arrived. So I feel it's a good place to start. Then after Bash. The next thing you should become familiar with, I would say, is Docker. Docker is a containerized um, application. So basically, what Docker does is containerize applications. And the essence of containerizing applications is for reliability and for uptime. And what do I mean by containerizing applications? For instance, you build a certain software and you know what you usually do is that you just write a script, maybe a YAML file, and then push it to production on wherever you're putting it, pushing it to production, or whether it's an AWS server or even GoDaddy, right? But if you have a VM that you're working with, or let's say Amazon Elastic Beanstalk or something like that, CloudFormation, you could actually automate the deployment in such a way that you use Docker and containerize, like put your application inside Docker. So the inside like a pod, right? You create an image. Well, let me just go. I don't want to go too deep. You create an image and then you containerize your application, which application you need. Advantages of containerizing your application is that if the application fails, you can just spin up another instance of the application instead of trying to know what's going on, what's failing, and then we have Kubernetes also, which like I would say is the senior brother of Docker, what Kubernetes basically do is manage the containers that Docker creates. So you we read on maybe on the internet or somewhere that Kubernetes is a container orchestration platform, which sounds kind of really technical. But what it does is that it carries the containers or the pods that Docker has made and supervises them. Let's put it that way. In such a way where you're able to query each pod through your master node. There is a pod that will just become like a master pod that you use to communicate to other pods, you know. And the technology was developed by Google to increase like Google's reliability, and it's a very good technology. So when you are familiar with things like this, um, you also have to become familiar with the CI/CD process because DevOps is literally nothing without the CI/CD process. You can say DevOps is just maybe site reliability engineering without CI/CD. So the CI/CD process helps test applications. Like for example, we have Circle CI where you can test your applications before deployment. Right? It's like an integrated system of it's like an integrated systems where the infuse from the dev team, the input from the testers, and you, the DevOps, are put together into one system where you can fail fast. If you're in the tech space, you'll be hearing those kind of terms, fail fast. So you need to understand and know um, what actually.
Giddy, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I became inaudible at some point, right?
Yeah, we couldn't hear you for a while.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry about that. I think my my AirPods died. So I was talking about this CI/CD process, and well, there are different tools. I just spoke about Circle CI. I hope I was audible now speaking about Circle CI.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think we lost you
Okay.
in the last point you were mentioning.
Oh, okay. So kind of lost my train of thoughts here. But let me try and gather them back together. So I think I was talking about the different steps or levels you can take, to start learning DevOps or to come into the DevOps journey. And I spoke about Bash. I also spoke about Docker, Kubernetes, and then I began to talk about the CI/CD experience. And in the CI/CD experience, I was using Circle CI as an example. Well, the other kinds of CI/CD tools, like for example, the Azure DevOps, where you can literally create pipelines to automate your deployments. So your role as a DevOps engineer is automating deployments. Now there are different kinds of deployments. I don't want to be too technical, but I'll just give you an example so that we can become, when we see things like this, we become familiar. Sometimes when you're installing some applications on your device, you will discover that this is the alpha version or the beta version, or you something like the final version. And all these versions have version numbers attached to them. Um, Beta deployments, alpha deployments are usually the first deployments you do when you're building your application. And when you put your application out there, when your application has been built and you think, okay, you can push it out for deployment, and you need testers to, maybe you need to do user stories and stuff like that. That could be your beta development phase. And from the beta development phase, the feedback you receive and everything is fine, then you can finally uh, um, do a final release on your application or your product. And the different kind of deployments, there's a deployment I like called blue-green deployment. And I think this is a deployment that Twitter used at some point. And what the blue-green deployment is where you deploy applications. Let's say you're using your current version of Twitter and Twitter develops new, should I say X? I prefer calling it Twitter. It's stuck in my head. X develops a new feature, but they don't know how this feature is going to, how their customers are going to perceive this feature, how their customers are going to interact with this feature, or whether it's going to be good for the company. What they can do is that they can do a blue-green deployment where they release these features to a certain amount of their customer base and not to everybody. And a good example of that would be, I don't know if for those of us that are familiar with Twitter, when they increase the word count from 150 to, I don't know what it is now. They can literally write a full article on Twitter now. Not everybody got that ability. Just a few people were selected, and a few people got, that new feature. So it was part of their DevOps testing process. And that process is called blue-green deployment. And once you see that, my customer base loves this new feature and they are interacting with it and it makes sense, you can now do a final release where you deploy it to all your customers. And there, in the blue-green deployment, there are different criteria in which you can select to make, such deployment. Like you can make, if you're adding a feature that you think will be more common among Gen Zs, you can select your selection criteria could be age, or could by country, or it could even be by ethnicity, depending on your customer, the customer database that you have. So basically, I've touched on the entry part of DevOps up to more technical aspects of the DevOps role.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we are like almost halfway gone. Let's see if we can take some few questions and then we'll wrap up so that we keep to our 1 hour time. Yeah, Bisa, you already said you can drop your questions if you have. So let me leave. Do you have any questions so far from what Gideon has said? Let's see if anybody raises up their hand. If not, we'll move over to the next questions I have. All right. So, Gideon, would you recommend any society or group or community, like online virtual communities for people that want to transition or become DevOps engineer?
Okay. The most familiar community, I was going to say I'm biased towards ALX. ALX has a community of different, tech folks, and in that community there are DevOps folks. ALX community. I think you have to register for one of their courses before you even join the community in the first place. But then there are other communities online that you can also um, let me see. There is this community I recently joined, but I can't really figure out the name of the community. I think it's Code Cloud, codecloud.com. Yeah, Code Cloud. It's a community of DevOps enthusiast and DevOps engineer, and they have really, really, really awesome DevOps courses on Code Cloud from the beginner stage right onto expert stage, and you can take free tests, on Bash, containerization, and some other DevOps tools on Code Cloud to help sharpen your skill. And yeah, in Nigeria, DevOps community in Nigeria. If you stay in Lagos, there are some certain tech meetups like Google Cloud meetups or AWS meetups in Nigeria. Mostly in Lagos. I think they do some in Abuja and some in some other states. If you have opportunity to come across such a event, it would be very, very nice to go to those events and network with people that if you have very good knowledge on DevOps, you most likely get a role, or you can meet people who could even potentially mentor you in your DevOps journey.
Okay, so if I'm not in Lagos, I should. What are the options I have?
So if you're not in Lagos, if you're in Abuja, what you should look for is online communities, um, or or you go to. I think in states, sometimes state governments do these tech hubs. Like there's Ogun State Tech Hub. I know there's one in Abuja. And in Lagos, they're everywhere. So I'm not going to mention Lagos. There's one in Kaduna also. There is in Kaduna. What's the name of this tech hub in Kaduna? Oh my God, I can't really remember it right now. But there are tech hubs or innovation hubs in certain states. I think what you should do is to find the innovation hub in your state and begin to go there regularly. Even though you don't know what you're doing, just go there, look at people, attend lectures, ask questions, and that's the best way to get started. So I think Obaji Ikechuku said something on the chat. What's your location? Niger State. Saying that school in Niger State. I went to FUT Mina in Niger State. And their community is in Niger State, but it's within the university campuses. Let me see. Are there any? I'll ask around. Perhaps I'll get back to Esther about tech communities in Niger State. If it were in Abuja, I know someone on the call that you can actually, someone who's on the call that can actually Oh yeah, you reside in Bida. Okay. I don't really know much about Bida. I think if you are staying in a remote location, your best bet would be joining an online community. So you could start with Code Cloud, join their online community, take the free courses, take the free tests, grow your skills in those areas, and perhaps you could take one or two courses that would strengthen your skill as you grow in your DevOps journey. And then once you have one or two certifications, then you can start applying for a junior role in any organization in Nigeria. Or you even apply for junior role or in international organizations as remote roles. Okay, I think we have another question here. Esther, taking the questions, right?
Yes, you can go ahead and take the question. I was even going to say to the person that is in Bida, I know that's a polytechnic, Bida Police there. So I think most times when you have universities around a city or a town, you would have communities. I think Bida
Yeah,
Poly also offers courses in like computer science, computer engineering, and all that. When I was living in Mina was when this whole Google something development was coming up, Google community and all that. So
yeah.
the university or the polytechnic in Bida can also be a good option to check out for community, or worst case scenario or best case scenario, or whatever. You can also join an online, a virtual community. Yeah, you can go ahead and take the next question.
Okay, Gregory is asking me a question. So, am I open to monitoring newbies coming into the DevOps space? Actually, it's something I've been thinking of recently. So that I actually have my plate very full, but I think I can. Um, I have a friend that has an kind of a podcast he does every Friday night, and you know, it's a tech podcast, but it's not like the regular podcast. It's just a Google Meet meeting where everybody comes and discusses life and their job roles and tech and everything. And I think from it, I've been able to get one or two people under my wing. So yeah, yes, Gregory, I'm open to mentoring um, newbies who want to deep dive into a DevOps role.
Okay, let's see. Do we have more questions in the community? Maybe when you answer the next question, it will prompt people to ask their questions. So, what are the possible platforms to look for to search for DevOps roles? One, and then two, what do you think are the key skill sets for a DevOps engineer to acquire?
Okay, if you're searching for a DevOps role, I think one of the beautiful places to find such roles is on LinkedIn. I feel LinkedIn is one of the nice places because on LinkedIn you see a lot of DevOps role. On LinkedIn, whether it's a senior role, whether it's a junior role, whether it's even a mid-level role. A lot of organizations in Nigeria are offering hybrid or remote work scenarios. So you don't necessarily have to be in Lagos per se. Or if you are in a state like close to Lagos, since it's a hybrid role, you can just breeze in once or twice in a week or even in a month. You know, so LinkedIn is a good place. Another good place to search for roles are, especially when you are looking for roles that are not within Nigeria, is Glassdoor, and yeah, Glassdoor. I'm trying to think about more places where you could find more. Okay, well, if you are really confident in your DevOps ability, you could freelance on Fiverr, or you have a connection to you can get a DevOps role here in Nigeria. Well, so I would say LinkedIn, I would say um, Glassdoor for roles that are not within Nigeria, mostly in Europe, I would say, and then also meetups. Meetups are very important. As a tech person or someone who is looking to go into tech, meetups are very important. Whether they are virtual, you could sign up for Microsoft events, virtual events, or in-person events in your state or in your city. But if you can't afford to travel, online events, AWS do the same thing. Online events, listen, take notes, Google, YouTube, those are literally your friends, and especially these days, AI, ChatGPT is also your friend. It will definitely help you in your journey, and it will definitely help you when you eventually land the role. Now, what are the skill sets required for AWS? So if you typically searching for a role, but there are soft skills and there are hard skills. Start with soft skills. You need to be someone who is able to collaborate in a team. Collaboration is one of the most important, if not the most important, soft skill when it comes to
DevOps engineering, because you most likely be working in a team, and this team has a framework. You have an agile framework, perhaps it's just a waterfall framework, and you need to be able to understand those frameworks and be able to meet your targets and work with people. People could be quite frustrating. You need to be able to work with people. You need to be able to um, work in a team. You also need to be able to. You also need to be versatile with simple skills. When I was at ALX, there were complaints because at ALX, once you are done, they help you get roles. But when people get these roles from ALX, the organizations began to complain, and their complaint is that these people that you give us are extremely skilled at the job, but they lack the ability to do basic tasks like send emails appropriately, because in corporate organizations is what they call corporate jargon, right? Like, I hope this mail finds you well. You understand? And you know, you not adding best regards or at the end of your mail can trigger a boss somewhere. As in my experience, as that's happened to me, simple stuff like that, knowing how to um compose mails that can actually reflect, because in DevOps, if there is a problem, certain deployment is failing and it's causing the company to bleed cash, you need to be able to tell where the problem is, what the problem is, and how to fix the problem, and not be using words like I believe the problem is from here, or I think this is where the problem is. You need to be specific, you need to be accurate, so you need to be able to gather your thoughts appropriately, when writing maybe incident reports, and you also need to be able to use tools like Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, as simple as these things are. And on your role, you may even need to draft up the the software architecture. The software architecture. You may be like, oh no, that's not really a DevOps role. You're correct if you're working in a big organization, if you're working in an organization that have a structure already. But if you're working in a startup, you might even write code as a DevOps engineer. So, you're working in a startup, you will write code, you test it, you will deploy it, and that's one of the things that build you up. If you want to go through, baptism by fire, you just work for a startup organization. Yeah, it's literally baptism by fire. So once you you have your soft skills in check, then the hard skills you need, you will see skills like Bash, see skills like containerization, orchestration, and Kubernetes, Docker, or you will see skills like Terraform. I didn't mention Terraform as a tool earlier on, but Terraform is a tool where you use to automate deployments from beginning, like full deployments from scratch to finish. Just write code out in different YAML files, depending on your understanding of how the application is supposed to deploy, and also your understanding of Terraform. And it handles deployments. You can even do testing on Terraform to build, to test, to deploy. It's an amazing tool. And in DevOps, most times you need to take certification courses and you need to become certified for you to bolster your ability to land good roles. Now, you could get the Azure 401 certification for DevOps, you could get your AWS DevOps certification, or you can get the both. If you can, the more the merrier. You also need to get, if you can, Linux, maybe a Red Hat Linux certification also. So these are the certifications you need to have under your belt. They are like, they are what will propel you, to easily land a role. And other certifications you might also need, you would also need perhaps a Kubernetes certification. You might also need a Terraform certification, but I believe if you have a Terraform certification, it should cover for Kubernetes. But what do I know? So in the hard skill side, you need to have at least a certification to back up your hard skills. And if you have those certifications, landing roles should be a breeze because people know that these certifications are quite you they're quite tough to acquire. I remember when I was reading for my first certification, AWS machine learning. It was pretty tough. The kind of questions you come across are applied questions, that they'll ask you question as if you are working in an organization and there is this problem and then you need to fix it. How do you go about it? So these are certifications that you need to get to bolster your skill set also. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. What other question?
Okay. Gregory has a question. He said the podcast with my friend I earlier spoke about what time is it? It's usually on Fridays by 10 p.m. It starts on Fridays by 10 p.m. I would I don't know how to do this. He usually posts a link on his WhatsApp page just before it starts. So perhaps 10 p.m. Nigerian time, right? West African time. So perhaps I could get the link and find a way to share it. Perhaps I share it to Esther. She finds a way to get across. So you get to hear a lot of people talking about their experience in different fields, and organizations in Nigeria. Some of I've met um, the managers or high ups of some tech organizations in Nigeria on that meeting too, like Blue Chip. I don't know if we are familiar with that company. It's a machine learning, it's a data science company in Nigeria that helps organizations and their vendors to different banks and different organizations in Nigeria to make sense of their data. They also do DevOps, they do data science. I've met one of their co-founders on the meeting. So I'll try to get the link across if I can. I'll most definitely try. And another question Gregory asks is, he said, talking about certifications, what certifications relevant to DevOps would you recommend for a start? For a start, first of all, I think the first certification you should get is a Red Hat Linux Red Hat certification, which shows that you are very conversant with Bash scripting language and with the Linux operating system. Red Hat specifically, because Red Hat is what enterprise organizations use, basically because Red Hat has support. So you can start for certification, start with Red Hat certifications. Then you also need you after having that certification, you need to have at least two optimal cloud certifications, right? And the best two cloud certifications I would say you should get. First of all, if you intend on working within Nigeria, I would say Azure DevOps certification because most Nigerian organizations use Azure DevOps. Only a few I've come across that uses AWS, mostly startups uses AWS. But if you intend to expand your horizon, AWS DevOps certification is also a must-have. Like I said, the more the merrier. I would recommend having AWS certification, DevOps certification, Azure DevOps certification, and possibly Google Cloud Computing, GCP certification if you can put that under your wing too. Then after you, in order of hierarchy, after the Bash and the cloud certification, then you can go towards containerization certifications like Kubernetes and then Terraform. If you have your Red Hat, you have your cloud, and you have your Kubernetes. These three are enough to land you a good role in basically any organization worldwide. But having more and having years of experience under your belt is literally the icing on the cake.
All right, thank you so much. So we're just 6 minutes off to the end of the webinar. So what would be your last words before you leave us?
Well, nothing really is easy in life. Um, if you're finding an easy way out of stuff, there is no free meal. You literally have to um, put your head down. And usually these days I've discovered that people who, settle down and really learn something that actually gets rewarded, in life generally. And that's why I believe the wealthy people keep getting wealthier and then leaving everyone else in the dust. So it's like, pardon me to use the illustration in the Bible where a wicked master gives his servants talent, 1, 5, 1, 2. To those who worked more, they got more. I mean, to those who multiplied their talents, they got more. And to those who saved, they got less. So if you have a goal in life, life is unpredictable. Life teaches you lessons. But if you stick to your plan and you grow, it may take time. It will take time, but if you stick to your plan and you grow, life would eventually bend towards you and will give you what you want. So whenever starting tech is not easy, I just have to tell you, regardless of the area of tech that you decide to venture into, at some time you will doubt your conviction. You will seriously doubt your conviction. Well, you have to be determined and you have to encourage yourself. Find people who have the same like-mindedness as you do. Stay with them. Find people who don't give up easily, who can encourage you. Find people, become friends with people who do the same line of work as you do or are higher than you. It's one of the easiest, if not the easiest way to actually grow. And just stay determined and keep pushing. Keep pushing. Even in an economy that is failing or in an economy that is stagnant, if you are persistent with whatever you do, you succeed. You will definitely succeed. Life has a way of rewarding those who are persistent, you know. Even though the environment is not conducive, your doggedness takes you out of the environment and puts you in an environment where you would actually make or have impact. And I would say eventually when years has passed and you look back and you're grateful, like Thanos watching the sunrise on a grateful universe. What out One of the best things is to be able to give back to community, to be able to bring up people who are struggling, to be able to encourage people, be a mentor to 1 or 2 people when you don't necessarily have to have arrived per se, but once you have a certain level of comfort and the trajectory of your life becomes predictable, I feel it's very important to be able to bring up at least 1 or 2 people, at least your level, or even surpass you. I think there's joy in that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I think there's a question from Obaji. He says, approximately how many years does one need to this skill? Um, in 1 year, you can acquire the skills needed to work as a DevOps engineer. Heck, if you are someone that catches things quickly in 6 months, within that time frame, the best you can land is a junior role. In a junior role, you can be in a junior role for 2 to 3 years, and then you enter a mid role, or perhaps in some organizations that are fast-paced, a senior role. In the mid role, you can spend an average of another 2 to 3 years, and then you become a senior developer or a senior architect or senior DevOps engineer. So in total, if you are asking how long does it take to become really, really skilled to the level of a senior DevOps engineer, I would say 6 to 9 years. But if you're just starting up your DevOps journey, within a year, you can really acquire, especially if you have an inkling towards tech. And you must not necessarily have studied a tech-related course in the university. When I was at I Aspire Data Fellowship, Data Science Fellowship, I I personally believe that one of the hardest things to learn in tech is data science, especially when you are learning deep learning. Man, there were a lot of dropouts, and there were people who studied fishery or aquaculture, and they were there, and I was surprised. What tech background do these people have? But their doggedness and their tenacity, man, they graduated and they're working in big organizations across Nigeria. Some have even left the country right now, and it just, to me, it's a testament of human, tenacity. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are, whether you have an ink into it or not. If you have decided that this is the path that you want to go and you're determined towards it, you will achieve your goal. I've seen people with there's a lady, she literally cries every day. She doesn't know what she's doing, but she's currently a software developer doing good here in Lagos. And not giving up is the way to go.
All right, thank you so much, Gideon. Thank you to everyone that joined. Thank you to Ikechuku, Jeremiah, Victor, Evelyn. If I don't call your name, just Ifolua. Thank you to Joy. Thank you, Precious. Thank you, Stella. Gideon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
This
you, Esther.
this is the African Growth Tribe. So we're gonna have this recording uploaded on the YouTube channel for those that want to watch it much later. So from all of us to you, we say thank you and see you next week. Next month, actually, for the next webinar.
All right. Thank you so much. God bless you all.